Overall, going back and revisiting this film, I didn't love it. I didn't. I found a lot of it to be pretty cringy. I know that's a word that
Hey, what's up, and welcome back to Interpreting the Stars, where today I'm going to be joined by my buddy Anthony A. Perez to discuss a film from both of our childhoods, Clockstoppers. Clockstoppers is about a couple of high school students that come across a watch that has the ability to send them into hyper time, which changes their molecular bodies to experience time faster than anybody else, giving off the appearance that they've stopped time altogether. When a group of very bad men kidnap his father in search of this watch, these kids must find a way to save him without placing the watch in the wrong hands. So, first of all, huge thanks to Anthony for joining me in yet another review. I've left a link to his channel in my description box down below for y'all to check out and give him some love. This guy's pretty passionate about everything that he does, so I'd appreciate it if you check out everything that he has to offer. We'll be hearing his thoughts on Clockstoppers in just a hot second! Before we do that, though, a little bit of background. This is one of the few films in my childhood that I saw a ton of times. This, along with Good Burger, was basically the orange VHS tape that I'd always pick up at Family Video or Blockbuster, and eventually Clockstoppers was the first DVD that I ever owned, back when we had to install a DVD player into our desktop computer. I have a lot of nostalgia surrounding it, so my thoughts on it are most likely going to be influenced by that. You know, I don't know if I particularly liked the performances as a kid, or if it was all about the concept for me. That stinking watch. As a kid, I collected special watches. If it did something fun, I had one. I had a kid's spy watch that supposedly detected lies. I had a calculator watch, a couple of universal remote control watches that controlled TVs, which was a lot of fun to use in classrooms and restaurants. I had a PDA watch, which was essentially an early version of a smartwatch. I've had actual smart watches, fitness watches, all that. I even wanted a special watch that could play TV, but I never got around to it since that costs so much money. And then you got this movie about a watch that stops time, and that was right up my alley, and for years I wanted a replica of the watch scene in this movie, even though I knew it wouldn't stop time actually. But I liked how it looked, you know? And to be honest, I do like the concept here, because stopping time on its own is a relatively unique approach to time travel adjacent subgenre, right? And this film actually attempts to explain it other than just stopping time, by using Einstein's theory of relativity, that if you go fast enough, you can slow down time almost to a complete standstill. Other films have approached the same idea by saying, you know, if you go even faster, you can go back in time altogether. But this was a pretty interesting and, dare I say, original take on that. As for the leads here, I do like them. I don't love them, but it's kind of a part of the nostalgia for me, especially French Stewart. He's probably the worst actor in the film because he's just so ridiculous, but I actually like him since he's also the comedic relief. In general, the biggest thing that I have to say about this movie is just that it's plain dumb fun. What would you do if you had a watch that could stop time? I don't know. Now, before I get into some of my negatives, let's hear what Anthony has to say. Take it away, man.
What's going on, Dave and all his viewers? Again, a big thanks, my friend, for having me here in another video. It's always a pleasure. And this time around, you actually wanted me to join you for Clockstoppers. And funny enough, this is actually one that you hit me up with not too long ago and said, you remember what movie we forgot to collab on? And I was like, what's that? And you said, Clockstoppers. And it literally just jolted my mind back. You ever have a moment where you have something planned, there's something you want to do, but you forgot to write it down, and then somebody reminds you of it, and you're just like, that's pretty much what happened with this collab review. He asked me to be in this video for Clockstoppers months ago, and since then we've done multiple videos on each other's channels, and we both just kind of forgot about it, and I'll definitely take majority of the credit as far as forgetting. But the time is now to talk about Clockstoppers from 2002, a film that, going back and revisiting it, I can genuinely say I wasn't crazy about, but I didn't hate it, but I didn't love it. When I was a kid, I definitely went and saw this in theaters. I remember that experience. I saw it with my dad and my sister, and back then I liked it. I remember talking to my friends about it who had seen it at the time, and I remember it being kind of part of the discussion for that short period of time that the film had come out. And when you asked me to revisit it, I was actually pretty excited because I remember really enjoying the premise of this film, you know, really basically centered around this clock that stops time, or at least so I remembered. Because going back and revisiting the film, I was very pleasantly surprised to see that it's actually hyper time that they go into, that they're actually moving incredibly fast rather than actually stopping time, which I guess kind of, you know, negates the actual title of the film, Clockstoppers, because they're not actually stopping time. They're moving faster, but I guess you can say technically they kind of are stopping time. Overall, going back and revisiting this film, I didn't love it. I didn't. I found a lot of it to be pretty cringy. I know that's a word that you don't like me very much using, Dave. I know it kind of annoys you sometimes, but yeah, man, there was definitely some cringe element of this film. The soundtrack was very early 2000s, especially for like a teeny bop kind of film like this. A lot of Blink-182 in this film, and just a lot of music of the time. And I'm a Blink-182 fan, so don't get me wrong. It's not like I don't like the music that's in this film, but it's very much of its time in terms of just being a teenage kind of just kids movie of the time. Overall, the film for me, where it really lacks is in its story and its characters. The dialogue is all over the place, and that's where a lot of the cringy factor comes in for me. Sure, with any film out of a specific era, especially the early 2000s, you're gonna have cheesy special effects, and you're gonna have some cheesy you know, outfits and just things of the time, of that era, that were just, you know, part of that world that just don't hold up today. But there are a lot of movies from this time that have good stories or have just, you know, good decent elements when it comes to character development, and this film just didn't have that for me. It feels incredibly rushed a lot of the times when it comes to the characters and the different journeys that they're going on. The relationships between characters seem to evolve incredibly quickly. There are characters who are part of the main set of characters that quite frankly have no real role in the film itself and are just kind of there to be there. But overall, this is a big over-the-top silly cartoonish kind of film in a lot of ways, and you know, it is what it is, right? This isn't a movie that I can really just bash on and say this is a terrible, complete, just, you know, shame to cinema. But also, it's not a film that I'm clamoring to revisit anytime soon again. You know, I think this will probably be my final revisit of this film unless I have some purpose to revisit it in the future. I haven't had a reason to go back and revisit this film in about 20 years, so I can't really see myself going back and revisiting it now, having seen it as an adult. But I do appreciate you having me on once again. A couple things that I do want to mention. I have some notes here as far as the people that are part of this movie, and I actually didn't know until I was actually doing some research on this film that Jonathan Frakes, who plays Riker in you know, a lot of the Star Trek stuff and has also directed Star Trek things, is actually the director of this film. And so yeah, I don't necessarily see that talent that came from Star Trek into this. You know, again, the film's not terrible, but it's definitely not great. The second the movie ended, my fiance, who was watching it with me, who had never seen the film, was just like, yeah, that wasn't great. And I can't help but agree with her. Overall, this isn't a film where I cared about any of the characters or the events that took place in this movie, but I did enjoy a lot of the little silly antics and the basic gist of this film, really, you know, centering on hypertime and these characters getting in and out of different antics using hypertime. That part of the film was definitely cool, and as I was watching it, I thought to myself, if they were to remake this film today or take the same kind of premise, give it a new name, and do something like this, I think you could definitely have some really cool elements. But yeah, like a lot of early 2000s films, a lot of the dialogue, some of the music choices, the way that they actually cued the music into the movie, definitely the attire, and things like the DJ scene in this film are just very cringy. There are so many moments in certain performances and just overall that whole teenage vibe from that time that's displayed in movies like this that just doesn't work for me. And going back and revisiting it, it just had me face palming, just kind of laughing at the movie when I feel like sometimes the film wanted me to laugh with it. Beyond that, the most notable things about this film for me are that Robin Thomas is in this film, who is Calabar from the Halloween Town movies on Disney Channel, which I grew up enjoying, so it was nice to see him in this movie. Completely forgot he was in this. And then French Stewart, who I think would go on to play Inspector Gadget in the sequel back in the day and was just in a bunch of random movies at that time, is also in this film. And French Stewart, even though I enjoy his antics, I have to say, yeah, he just doesn't really feel like he is in the right movie when it comes to this movie. He feels like he's on a little bit of a higher level in terms of like just kind of living in a heightened reality than everybody else. That's not to say that his performance is bad, but just that he kind of feels a little bit disconnected from the movie compared to everybody else who kind of is playing it on an even place. You also have Michael Biehn in this film, you know, from Terminator fame as the villain, and I completely forgot that he was in this movie. So seeing him, I would arguably say he was probably the best performance in the film, but I also really enjoyed Robin Thomas in this film. I think his performance was great. In terms of the main characters, the teenage characters, couldn't care less. The character of Zach and Francesca really don't do much for me in this film. I remember as a kid having a fat crush on Francesca, and rewatching it today, one thing that was definitely weird is there's definitely moments where they're kind of sexualizing, not kind of, definitely sexualizing the character of Francesca, and she's supposed to be a high school student. And, you know, as a kid when this movie came out, it was cool to like be like, hey, the hot older girl, but you know, definitely going back and revisiting it now as a 28-year-old, if there was a movie that came out like that today and I was watching, you know, some, you know, teeny bop, you know, adventure film that had, you know, a teenage girl being sexualized, it would definitely be weird. And it's definitely weird going back and revisiting this. There's literally scenes where she's like, yeah, definitely sexualized. They're like, you know, definitely having the camera go on her body. There's a moment where she's like putting a shirt on and she totally has her bra out. And I'm just thinking, this is supposed to be a teenage girl. So definitely some dated elements as far as that. But this has gone on far longer than I anticipated. So a big thanks to David once again for having me here in another video. Always a pleasure, my friend. And I look forward to more. As usual, you guys can find my channel down below in the description box. I'm assuming Anthony A. Perez. I do movie reviews, TV reviews, and just fun movie related content over on my channel. Again, a big thanks to Dave for having me here in this video. And I'll go ahead and pass it back to him. Bye-bye.
Thank you once again to Anthony for being in this review. Don't forget, I have left a link to his channel in my description box below for you all to check out. Give him some love and tell him that I sent you. Now, as for my negatives, a lot of what you had to say, Anthony, I do agree with, at least a little bit. It truly is a product of its time, especially with Blink 182 and Smash Mouth. It's a bit much, especially if you're just watching it for the first time today. Also, some of the visual effects in this film are indeed dated, though technically nowhere near as bad as they could be, especially for a kid's film. But really, my main negative with this film comes right down to a very technical answer: the math, or the science of the technology. You kind of get a good idea of how fast these people should be going when French Stewart says, "I've been in here for a week and it looks like I've aged 20 years. Math tells you there's a little bit over 1,000 weeks in 20 years, which means everyone is going about 1/1000th speed they normally would. Which coincidentally means that if you're in hypertime for 1 minute, in real time, that's 16 hours. But there's one moment in the film particularly where they're mostly acting more invisible than fast, and that's at that DJ party, and they're helping their buddy win some kind of contest. So they're moving him back and forth and making him do all these different things, and he's basically doing all those things in the same exact speed they're doing it, which means that they're invisible, not fast. Probably just an oversight, probably just a plot hole, but it is a little bit distracting for me. However, at the end of the day, it is a kid's movie, and thinking back to everything Nickelodeon has ever done, at least that I've seen, I have to say that it's one of the biggest things that still stands out to me to this day, and it's still nothing that I wouldn't rewatch. And sure, part of that is certainly nostalgia, and I understand it's not quite the same for Anthony. He's probably more accurate on that than I am, but I still like it. You know, I still have fun with it, especially because it brings me back to my own childhood. A time when I was in middle school and about to embark on all the dramatics of high school, and so I think fondly back to it. Looking at my unbiased score, I would say, in general, this film was made fine. You know, it's nothing crazy, but the narrative is solid, the concept is pretty original, and even though the music is a bit much, I can't help but think of the music when I think about the film as a whole, which does affect the score, which is 70%. So nothing crazy, you know, nothing terrible either. My bias score, on the other hand, I'm sorry, Anthony, but I like the movie. I've never not had a great time while watching it, and sure, even though I give you crap on it, I can see where others might cringe on this one. But I could also see the same for Good Burger, and I love that movie even more. So my bias score for Clockstoppers is 90%. And when we combine the two scores together, we come to the final rating of 80%. 80 out of 100 possible stars, or a B+ letter grade. Guys, have you seen Clockstoppers? If so, let me know your thoughts on it in the comment section down below. And as for YouTube, you guys know what to do. Hit that like, subscribe button, and bell to be notified when I come out with my next review. And until then, peace out.
Dave examines movies we just watch for fun. Davey is the expert. He is the #1 critic that I go to when I need a movie.